Feeling loose? Good? Okay,
7:02.
excellent. Good evening and welcome to the Tuesday, February 26th, 2019 meeting of the Norwood Trails Advisory Group. I'm going to go around the table and ask everyone to enter and sign in, please.
Lee Leach.
Vic Babel.
Jerry Miller.
Ernie Paczkowski.
Fran Rush.
John Pratt.
We do have some, Joe Greeley, sorry. Yes, I am here. We do have some invited and welcome guests this evening. Do you care to introduce yourself?
I'm Marguerite Lee.
Gary Riggett from the Walpole Trails Committee.
Glenn Maffey from the Walpole Trails Committee.
Great, great, welcome. We're gonna take care of a couple of housekeeping items, but certainly you can come join us at the big table if you're so inclined. We're scary, but,
I may have to leave early, so.
okay.
Bring your chairs.
We did,
So move my stuff down? Oh, sorry.
we're here in Norwood Town Hall. The building itself is ADA accessible and ADA compliant. If anyone has any questions relative to that, you can contact Bernie Cooper at Town Hall or myself, Jay Greeley at norwoodma.gov. All of our meetings are, luckily, thanks to Norwood Community Media, NCM, all of our meetings are taped and accessible on streaming tape on NCM. We also have minutes taken every meeting. We do, even though we are newly knighted as an advisory group, we do follow the open meeting law. To that end, we do have minutes. We do have a set of minutes. Lee, you want to tell us what we got?
They are in your packet for the last 3 meetings, which would have also included the library presentations. So we've sent those out as attachments. If you have any corrections or additions, let me know.
No, I think I was able to look at it on my phone, believe it or not.
Technical wizard, you?
Oh, yeah, I just
Can't get this thing going.
Good. Does anyone have, I don't want to put anyone at a disadvantage, if we can always circle back at our next meeting, unless people have had a chance to look these over.
So these minutes will be from the January 8th, January 22nd, and the aforementioned February 13th meeting. On the February 13th meeting, we do have a PDF file of the PowerPoint presentation that you guys made to go along with these as well. So.
Great, motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Made and second, further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Unanimous? Thank you. Moving right along. Gentlemen, the esteemed, I guess this would,
be up here too. Come on, squeeze
I
in.
now have to.
You've been called out.
You're on TV.
Yes, thank you.
Focus the camera now.
no pressure at all.
Did you put your makeup on?
Yeah.
You gonna sandwich me between the Walpole people?
Yes. I'm from Norwood.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
We do have what I think is the full Norwood, Walpole Trails Committee.
That's correct.
Great.
That's
This is the
correct.
full committee?
This is us.
This is it.
Wow. This is it.
Shocking,
Nice.
is that right?
Yeah.
Our membership has fluctuated. We've had as many as I think 8 in the past, and now we're down to 2. And Glenn joined 2 or 3 years ago.
Gally was a solo act before I came on board.
Why do you think it went down to 2 from 8?
One guy died very suddenly. And
You asked, okay?
Meetings, all of our, did I
So
say-
let's try not to
Did I
lose any
say,
members.
did I
to
say
that.
all of our meetings are taped? I said that, right?
Just
Yeah.
like thank you for keeping Jerry in with work. For undertaker.
it was a shock. He was 52.
Yeah.
And unexpected.
I'm sorry to hear.
And one member was very active when her 2 sons were either in Cub Scouts or Boy Scouts. They aged out. She followed them.
I know, you've done it.
Yeah, no, I'm just, but it's just, I mean, so you're a new group and.
Yeah, I don't want
under-
that to happen to us.
Yeah, okay, okay, but then moving on,
Looking around.
Al Getz, many of you guys may be
Yeah.
familiar with Al. Al formed the Trails Committee, I think back in the late '90s, and he was at the meeting, so I joined the Walpole Trails Committee in '04. And he was active at that point, and a few years later, he's spread very thin. He has a lot of different things going on, a lot of committees that he's involved in, so his attendance just sort of ended. So,
So just to back up a second, so we've, under the heading of collaborating with others and forming partnerships, we've, Lee had introduced us to the idea of the Walpole Trails Committee, and Gary and Glenn, and we've invited these gentlemen to join us just to give us some insights and allow us, if you could, allow us to ask you some questions like how did the Trails Committee form and all that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
well, we're gonna spend a half an hour roughly just talking about it, and we're gonna be much better at the end of that half an hour.
Yeah, and we have a lot to learn from you guys. It seems like you've already come a long way, and you're already meeting out on the trail. I saw from your minutes that you met in University Ave. That's a new trail that you.
It's
Okay, it's allowed, right?
it's a future trail. It's
Future trail.
bushwhacking.
Yeah.
Bushwhacking right now.
Yeah, it gives you something to work toward. So.
yeah. So the history of the Walpole Trails Committee is that initially, when the Bay Circuit Trail approached the Walpole Conservation Commission back in the late '90s, that they wanted to route the Bay Circuit Trail through town, Al Getz was a member of the Conservation Commission, and still is, and he worked closely with the Bay Circuit Advisory Council. And, so a lot of that work was the nuts and bolts of establishing where the trail was gonna be and routing it and so forth. But then the issue of maintenance and, future changes, trail maintenance, marking, and so forth came up, and then Al came up with the idea to create a Trails Committee for the future.
Can I
So,
interrupt just briefly and give a quick background on the Bay Circuit Trail? Is everyone here mostly familiar with the Bay Circuit? It's 200, correct me if I'm wrong,
10 miles.
210 miles from the North Shore down to, I think, Plymouth. 8.2, I think, miles of which are cut through Walpole. And just a quick one to point that out.
So Al established the Trails Committee in, I believe, the late '90s. I joined in '04, so it had already been established for a while. Initially, our focus was largely the Bay Circuit Trail. It is the largest trail in town. And since then, we've branched off into some different activities. So, so that's the history. Basically, it was to create and then maintain the Bay Circuit Trail. Currently, our activities are.
Turn this on?
Go ahead and say it,
So, our activities now fall into two categories, outreach and trail maintenance. So outreach is publicity. Facebook page, which Glenn has created and is doing a great job maintaining. We have a page on the Town of Walpole virtual town hall. I think Nora may have the same thing. And then periodically we'll have trail cleanups. We have a bit of a presence in town just due to our longevity. So groups that are looking for volunteer opportunities will approach us. Siemens approached us last year. They wanted to do a community volunteer team building sort of activity. They did something along that in Ponset River. Scouting groups approach us, and I guess that's about it. So that's the outreach part. It's publicity. It's publicizing the trails. We created a trails guide, which, as you can see, it's kind of primitive on its cover. I'll pass this around. I think we have a couple
It's
actually.
better than what we have.
So, the cover is a map of town showing natural regions within town, and then the individual pages talk about individual trails within town. So, for example, I only have one small page dedicated to Adams Farm. Adams Farm is conservation land. It's 330 acres, pretty close to Bubbling Brook. You guys may have
Yep,
been there,
yeah.
I'm familiar with it. So that has a whole network of trails. We also have a trails map that we're in the process of updating. So the Trails Guide refers you to the Adams Farm website and the Adams Farm Committee to get more information. For the freestanding trails in town, the format that I followed is the cover is the name of the trail, a brief description, how long it is, what the terrain is like, where to park. There's some small thumbnail-sized pictures showing you where to park and various features. And then the outline of the trail is sort of overlaid in a GPS. So kind of, we tried to use that format for all the trails in town.
I think, just real quick, I think people even in Walpole are surprised to find out that they say, oh, we have trails in Walpole, and in that packet you're looking at, you'll find 40 miles of trails, from Adams Farm to Town Forest to Bird Park. I mean, and everyone knows about Bird Park, but sure, there's what, 3 miles of trails in Bird Park, and so it adds up. Bay Sucker Trail is 8 miles, and so we have 40 miles of trails in Walpole, and people are just shocked who live in Walpole their whole lives and don't even realize it.
Yeah, and it's 40 miles and counting, because the first time I did a trails inventory, I think I estimated, I mean, it was before I bought my GPS, I estimated that we had like 17 miles. So I just finished GPSing all the trails in Adams Farm, and we have 16 point something just in Adams Farm. So yeah, we're up to 40, and it's probably another, maybe another 5 or so that need to be GPSed and updated and so forth. But okay, so that's outreach. The guide, or publicity, the website is all part of outreach, and then trails maintenance is the other part, and that's pretty self-explanatory.
So how do you do the maintenance with the 2 of yous and occasional Cub Scouts and Siemens?
People have been increasingly good about notifying us when there's a blockage. So I haven't been, there's some of the trails I haven't been on in a few years.
Has your
And
phone been off the hook in the last couple days?
I actually am looking forward to getting out there. We had a huge blowdown between Christmas and New Year's.
It takes one winter. You could clear a trail out, and it could be perfect, and I'll advertise it on Facebook. I say, Pinnacle Trail is open for business, and then 2 months later, after, any standard winter, and it won't be impassable, but there'll be just some trees over the trail, and it takes constant maintenance. So the trails you haven't been on in a couple of years will certainly need attention, but,
Yeah.
yeah.
Does the town get involved at all?
Yeah. So the big blowdown that happened between Christmas and New Year's this year was close to a project that we had just finished in November, and
By the
we
senior
had,
center?
no, we did a boardwalk.
Wasn't that by the senior center?
No, the senior center is on the other side of Washington Street. It's a mile or so from the boardwalk that we built.
Oh, the police station, is it by?
Yes, so the senior center is right next to the police station, and there's a rail trail behind that. It's the former Old Colony Railroad. It's the rail bed. So it's flat, graded. The town was involved in that because the ties were still in place for several hundred yards of that trail. Like, we don't want seniors stepping over railroad ties. We really don't want anybody stepping over railroad ties. So the town came in and removed all those, graded it, and yeah, both the police department and senior center actually butt up to that rail trail.
To answer your question, so Jarvis Farm is a good kind of landmark to find out where the boardwalk is. It connects it to Town Forest, so you might not know where Jarvis Farm is, but if you know what
Right by,
Mick Morgan's is,
Yeah,
and Common Street, so kind of across the street diagonally from McMorgan's.
So you go down that driveway?
Go down that long driveway to
Yeah.
Jarvis Farm. In the far corner, there'll be some signs to get you there behind some cabins, and there'll be an entrance. You go down, you know, a
It's
quarter
between,
mile,
yeah,
you
yeah.
cut left into
the
the town
access
forest.
road for Jarvis Farm is remarkably long.
It is, yeah.
It's maybe half mile, quarter
Yeah.
mile.
So Boardwalk
So
is not, it's not just, like, you can't just drive there. You need to actually go on a hike
Yeah.
to get there, which is kind of part of the fun.
So,
Yeah.
can you tell us, sort of like in a summary, what, this boardwalk trail, access trail on the boardwalk, sort of like the process, take it, you know, from conception to when you opened it in November?
Yeah.
Was it like,
Gary's gonna do
a
that,
year
but
and
just
a
to answer the question about whether we cooperate with the town, because I'm not sure we 100% did that, because they were involved in the boardwalk, so maybe DPW, I think we have a good relationship with the DPW.
Yeah, so,
Just to answer the question.
yeah, so the big blowdown that happened between Christmas and New Year's, it was a busy time for everybody. My family's in Connecticut, and I noticed the tree was down when I went for a run in the town forest on Saturday afternoon. Like, oh crap, you know, we're not gonna be able to get to this for a week. And the next time I was out there was Wednesday. I wanted to show my wife because it was huge, and it was gone. Somebody had called in the DPW, and they went out there with a skid steer and two really talented guys, and it was gone. I could not believe it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the one of the DPW supervisors, Bob LeBlanc, is the highway, parks, and cemeteries supervisor, and he was involved. He was one of the volunteers for the boardwalk project that ran from May to November of this year. So has access to and all the resources that a DPW would have, arborists, equipment, trained operators. You know, I mean, the labor that built the boardwalk was guys like Glenn and I. You know,
But the expertise of having Bob LeBlanc, being a cooperative partner and willing to pick up the phone and say, listen, we need, you know, he cut a trail to where the boardwalk is gonna be built, which helped us, you know, access the area. Having that cooperative relationship was important, I think.
it really is. So, I mean,
Joe, while I don't lose my thought, that would be a great, when we get to the point, when we're looking at some of these trails and actually getting in there and doing some work to, you know, I know like Jerry is, when he built the, you know, the walking path up at the, you know, teamed up with the landscape people. You know, we've got, you know, tree services, you know, maybe somehow, whatever, when we get to that point, we, you know, call on some of the tree services that may wanna,
maybe want to put a sign up.
may wanna put a sign up
Yeah.
or get in there and help us with, you know, because they've got that kind of equipment, you know.
How long do you have the sign up? after
Oh,
the-
actually, we don't because our help has all come through the town.
DPW,
Yeah,
We,
but-
I mean, we have a good relationship with our DPW as well.
Yeah, good,
But
it's
we
helpful.
do have some tree services guys in town that, when we get to that point, we may wanna call on them, at least for expertise.
Yeah.
You know, how to do it, what we can do. you know.
That's the thing, you call them for, hey, I just wanna ask your opinion, they're probably gonna offer to help, you know, the next breath, and you kinda like work your way toward the relationship that way.
So-
One thing that's concerning me now is the, well, Lyme disease and how do you, you know, warn people about that? And also, like, I know the trail by the landfill, everybody's saying, you went up there alone? There's coyotes
Oh,
there.
jeez.
And you must have them over in Walpole if we
Yeah,
haven't been
yeah, so,
always.
you know,
So
I,
how do you warn people about that?
They're orange.
So I do a lot of cross-country skiing when I can, when the
Yeah.
weather is right. And I've been doing these at Adams Farm for 15 years or so. So, years ago, and most of the time I'll send out a flyer that tells people, you know, if you're new to cross-country skiing, dress like you're going for a cold weather run, you know, don't overdress and so forth. And then I also have a section in there about coyotes. So I talked to the animal control officer years ago, and I've retained what he told me. Coyotes are a danger if you have a small unattended child or a pet. For an adult, you're fine. You're going to scare them off, even if it's a pack. So he said, don't worry about them for the most part. Sure, a little disconcerting when you see them. And if you have a small dog, you certainly want to keep it on leash or keep it under your control. But they're generally not a threat. I mean, you know, what you hear about in the news as far as interactions, well, human interactions with wild animals. The last thing I heard a few years ago was a guy that had a mountain lion in his garage out in central Mass near the Quabbin Reservoir or something. So, I mean, if coyotes were that much of a danger, we'd hear about run-ins.
Yeah.
So,
In the Lyme disease part of it?
we also, you know, as much as possible, we try to interact with different groups in town. I've met with the health department in the past because they have a walking program, but they mostly do the program on streets and sidewalks. So we meet. We've met to say, hey, let's expand your program to trails, and I'm happy to lead people to introduce them to trails and so forth. So Lyme disease is kind of their thing, and what they've done is you've seen those cards that they put at the town forest? So they have like a small
sure.
pocket-sized card.
ID.
So we should
Yeah.
get involved with the health department then.
You should,
They've
yeah,
already done it.
because,
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
They've done it with all playgrounds and
Talk to them.
park areas, there's signs out there.
Yeah.
So we just have to expand that to the trail.
okay, so they have a standard template sign, yeah, you put that at
That's
either
Lyme
trail
I think
edges.
disease and-
The point is, as part of your outreach and education, is also including these factors as you, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
do your-
So maybe I should put something in there about Lyme disease I haven't.
Yeah.
Now I got you guilty.
Well, no,
I
not
mean,
necessarily, but I
Facebook
am.
page too, I mean, there's lots of ways to
Yeah.
communicate.
Don't
Yeah.
worry about coyotes.
Basically,
Well,
yeah.
but you, I mean, I can send you the text that I've sent to people, and the animal control officer said, if you're a child unattended or a small pet, be worried, but otherwise you're generally okay.
So-
As far as the tree services, I haven't done this, but if Norwood decides to make a version of a trails guide, you could bring in advertisers and, you know, have them put in an ad somehow if you choose to do that. We spend a ton of money. Each one of these is $6. So every time,
So give them back, no, just kidding.
yeah, who are they?
Do you have it electronic?
Yeah, let's
Oh, yeah,
save
yeah.
this.
It is electronic,
Yeah.
it is online.
Yeah.
So whenever we have a community event, we have Walpole Day in the spring. So the Trails Committee and Town Forest Committee together gets a table, $10. And we hand out the Town Forest map and the Trails guides. But
And is it only the 2 years at that day?
I
Gary's
also bring
wife.
in the my wife, who's an adjunct member of both. But the Town Forest Committee is a little larger. I have 5 members on that. So
what's
we
the
can.
difference between the forest committee and the trails committee?
The-
Gary's chairman of the boat, but both of
No,
them are-
the
member of the board.
there's been a movement to have me be the chairman of the Town Forest Committee. I'm not an arborist. We have an arborist who's works at the DCR, really skilled guy, really talented, great organizer.
Town Forest is a beast in itself. We had the 100th anniversary a couple years ago. You guys do your own
We had the
logging.
lieutenant governor. It was a big event.
Why is it a beast?
Well, it was the Town Forest Committee goes back tens of years, whereas the Trails Committee is far newer. I mean,
You guys do
town-
logging, you have your own logging
Yeah,
program?
yeah. So
that
it
you
has
do
a
Town Forest?
Town Forest has a management plan. It's got a trust fund. It's just a much bigger entity than the Trails Committee. The
So when a tree falls, you take it away versus leaving it?
no, we do have planned harvests that the management plan dictates, you know, the timing and
That they earn
and-
money
and the
off of.
locations.
It's actually profitable.
Okay.
Yeah, the Town Forest Charter, which goes back to 1916, establishes that the Town Forest Committee, the Town Forest is self-funding. So if we do a harvest, it's for the health of the forest, and then any money, so the last harvest, for example, the contract that we bid out was 10 grand. The loggers kept 5, we got 5. And that goes into our trust fund. So it cost them $5,000 to get the lumber, and then they sold it off, and then we sort of split the money.
So just on that point, from a structure standpoint, so the Trails Committee is a formal town committee
Through the selectmen.
through the selectmen, the town forest.
Committee, I
Maybe.
guess, yeah. We also have a page on the website. We don't get money from the town, we don't have a budget through the town, whereas the Trails Committee does.
Okay,
Yeah,
I didn't know which hat.
So
you
we
were
is
on.
we, on both of them, yeah.
yeah.
Gets confusing.
Yeah.
To Joe's question, I'm not even sure I know the answer. So did the selectmen appoint the town forest committee, or how do you become a member of the town forest
I
committee?
think you, just like any volunteer position in town, you apply
To
through the
committee
Board of
itself?
Selectmen.
Oh, through the board of selectmen,
Yeah.
okay,
Well, I mean, first you would contact us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Us meaning the town forest committee or
yeah,
the.
or the Trails Committee, depends on which one somebody wants to pursue. And we'll say, all right, contact the Board of Selectmen secretary, she'll give you the application, she'll schedule you for a meeting before the Board of Selectmen, and then basically they just give you a couple minutes to talk about yourself and why you're interested.
Yeah.
It's probably similar with the Norwood.
Similar to what we
Trails
do with the
Committee.
historical commission or something,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Okay,
But you are a real person,
yeah,
you have a pulse.
yeah.
So what we're trying to, we're you guys in 1994 or whatever that you guys first started is, we don't have the, as far as I know, we don't have any other, either friends of or other active groups in town, but, whereas you guys have Friends of Adams Farm, you've got the Bay Circuit Trail cuts through, so you have to deal with them, you've got,
Town forest.
the Town Forest Group, so you've got various entities that you're all interacting with, and
That's right, yeah.
sometimes it's all you're on 4 different committees, but.
3, actually now 2,
You
I
resigned
just
from
dropped.
Adams Farm,
I
that's
had-
right.
yeah, I just had to.
Alright.
But we, I do a very good job of keeping my receipts organized. Could I pull something off on the town? Is there a check and balance? Well, the act of submitting receipts for reimbursement, I go through the accounting office, and it needs to be handled according to their fiduciary guidelines and stuff. But, I mean, but it is mostly me, I suppose. And they do a pretty good job. In fact, they actually, the boardwalk was close to a $20,000 project. And one of the receipts I turned in, I had bought some lemon drops. And they said, oh, you got some lemon drops. I'm like, you're kidding.
Yeah, well, they got it, right?
So-
You said you get a town, you're on the town budget? There's a
The
line
Trails
item
Committee is.
For the Trails
Yep.
Committee?
Yeah.
Can
Yeah,
I,
800
can I
bucks a
ask roughly what the town gives you on a budget?
$650 a year.
$650, yeah.
Okay.
No wonder there's only two.
Enough to
of
buy,
us.
yeah, enough to buy some,
Yeah.
Some $6.
so can I just, throw something in there, cause I know Gary mentioned, the kind of the mission is very simple of the Trails Committee, is to maintain trails, to promote trails. I kinda was thinking you could add one, with the boardwalk, is to improve, the already existing infrastructure, and the boardwalk is a grant that you applied for, that came in, the town chipped in a little bit as needed. But that was a big improvement, that wasn't just maintaining, that was sort of a whole separate sort of, mission. And there's other examples that I thought you might talk about and just.
Where did you get the money
Oh,
for
go
the
ahead, yeah.
boardwalk? Yeah,
Oh, that was a DCR grant.
DCR.
Yeah,
So-
Gary could certainly fill you in on that, I wasn't involved in the application of the grant.
Yeah. So, anybody that's ever written a grant, it's cumbersome. It's a time-consuming process. What helped me a lot was that I had some help from the Town of Andover Trails Committee. They had applied for and won a grant to do a boardwalk for the Bay Circuit Trail. And it's a well-known trail in the state government. So I kind of followed their template.
Did
But-
this involve the Bay Circuit Trail?
It actually, so, hand out it, yeah, you guys all have
I
this.
passed it
Right.
around, yeah.
So on the backside, the darker image here, so here's, cutting through this corner diagonally is Washington Street. same Washington Street, that's
Yeah.
right here. In the extreme upper left corner is the Walpole DPW, it's just off that page. But the white line that you see is the Bay Circuit Trail. So can you guys see
Yeah.
this thing? It sort of goes from upper left to sort of bottom center. This thing here is the Bay Circuit Trail.
But it was a trail before,
That's correct.
right?
Correct. So, on
They
what we,
use existing trail, yeah.
yeah,
Not for the boardwalk itself. The boardwalk itself, you had to kind of create a
yeah,
connect, yeah.
yeah. So,
Boardwalk
so
comes off the basic.
yeah.
Exactly.
So what we have, these purple lines are existing trails that were in one section of the Walpole Town Forest. One of which happened to be the Bay Circuit Trail.
And these are old trails, all of them?
Yeah, logging roads largely. Some of them are
A
just.
century ago, almost, like,
It's
long.
could be, yeah. It's hard to say.
Can you get to connecting Jarvis Farm with
Yeah,
the town
yeah, okay.
forest?
All right, so,
What's the purpose of it?
Where is the,
So Jarvis Farm
the boardwalk?
is at this extreme right-hand side. It's over here, Jarvis Farm.
Mm-hmm.
So a few winters ago, I was out poking around. I said, geez, it'd be nice to link this 150 acres of town forest with Jarvis Farm, which itself is only 25 acres, but this parcel is also owned by the town. That's close to 100 acres. So we got 150 on one side, about 125 or more on the other side.
And
So
no connection at this.
at that point, no connection. So
Wow.
we hunted around.
That's neat.
The best place for a connection, I found out, so we found an existing bridge that somebody had made out of scrap lumber. Like, oh, great. It was only 30 feet long. When I got home and downloaded the data from my GPS, it was actually on town of Sharon property. And that's way down here. It's like, oh crap, I don't want to get involved in that at this stage. So we went back and said, geez, all the main activity center of Jarvis Farm, which the town of Walpole runs a day camp up there, it would be great to have a link from that main activity center. So I started walking through the wetland, and it was like a mangrove. So it was such dense vegetation, it was like impassable. So the place that I settled on is just up here in the top center. You can see a couple of a purple trail with two red dots. So that's the location of the boardwalk. It's in the wetland of the School Meadow Brook. All right, so as I sort of started pursuing this a little more, like, you know, it would have been nice to have the trail at the heart of Jarvis Farm, but the wetland actually expands there. So
That was a narrow spot,
um,
pretty much.
the narrowest spot was down on the town of Sharon property,
Yeah.
so I went away from that. The next most narrow was where I put it, and then but if it was immediately accessible to Jarvis Farm, the best, the center of activity, it probably would have been 3 times as long, because the wetland sort of expands and then it contracts again. So
What was the cost of that?
the grant was for $13,800, and I wound up exceeding that by about $2,500. So about between 16 and 17,000.
We had a cushion with the town of Walton, gave us a cushion.
Oh, good.
Because, you know, the town manager, the town administrator in Walpole wanted this. I was applying for a competitive grant. There was no guarantee that I was gonna win it. So, he said, how much money do you want? Off the top of my head, based on some quick calculations, I said $7,000. So he gave me $7,000. And then we went to Andover to look at their boardwalk, and $7,000 would have got us a real skimpy boardwalk with rope railings, and we just wanted something a little wider, beefier, more solid. So I basically doubled the estimate, but it was an estimate based on a design that we were comfortable with.
Now, did you have to do a lot of permitting applications?
No, the building department didn't want anything to do with us. And that's understandable. I mean, they gave us some guidance.
What about, you know, the watershed?
I did have to file a notice of intent. And part of that process was a survey, which was $1,600.
And that's with the
Yeah.
Can we pass it around?
Yeah.
The Conservation Commission, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so maybe if you could,
Oh, that is nice.
Thanks, thanks.
so maybe if you could just
I have to
Professional,
edit it,
huh?
keep it
Yeah.
from going to sleep.
give us a Reader's Digest version of how what your interaction like within the town departments, especially the Conservation Commission.
I mean, those are folks that I've interacted with for a few years now.
Do they trust you?
Get it back.
Yeah, they trust me. They have a record that, you know,
Good track
that,
record.
yeah. So, I said, I applied for this grant, I won it, now what's gonna be the next step? And filing the notice of intent, and, the survey was meant, I mean, so you can see this is in the middle of nowhere. So there was no landmarks, no benchmarks, no references anywhere. So the survey was meant to place the boardwalk within this wilderness. So, and it also, so one interesting point was I estimated the length of the boardwalk based on these two dots, which came from my GPS, and those are separated by 250 feet according to the GPS. When the surveyors got out there and did the survey, it actually came in at 195 feet. So,
Interesting.
yeah, because, I mean, so GPS, my GPS, it's a Garmin Oregon, and it said, you know, any point has a 25-foot accuracy. So I think I was at the extremes, like
50?
50, yeah, 50.
So
So
how'd you get across the measure?
the surveyors did that. That's where the 195 feet
Yeah.
came from. But my,
But when you said you did a GPS,
yeah, what,
Wading through.
waiters.
Yeah,
yeah,
Yeah, I actually
$35 at Bass Pro Shop.
I contracted Giardia.
Yeah.
That's what it says.
I was-
It was a
It sounds
mess.
like, though, that you were very conservative on like the grant money, some of these other parameters that would affect the price or the cost.
Yep.
And
so you get like 650, but if you have a special project, the town will back you up on it probably.
Yeah, so the $7,000 that they gave me was part of a capital, and the line item was called trail improvements.
So it's still good for, you know, future,
Yeah.
that unused portion will hopefully be used for a worthwhile project up at the senior center, the new rail trail, there's some ideas up there. And just, can I go back to Joe's question about working with the town? Landis Hershey, the conservation agent, she wasn't just rubber stamping this project along the way. I mean, at one point I went into her office and what I thought was a relatively minor change, where the trail was kind of like a zigzag at the end of the boardwalk, we straightened it out. And actually, we did it, and then we asked for permission after the fact, I think. But anyways, I went to her office to say, we just wanted to let you know what we've done, you know, in full disclosure and all that, and kind of hoping that she might just say, yeah, no big deal, but she actually got in her car and drove out there, and she said, you know, I don't want to treat you any different than I treat the, you know, homeowners. If I'm here, I need to be able to tell them that I'm being just as, you know, difficult with you. Not difficult, but just as, you know, on the ball with you.
Yeah.
And she was, and it wasn't a big deal at the end of the day.
There's roughly somewhere just shy of half of our property, the properties that we've inventoried are on conservation land. So we've already had those discussions of if, when we go forward with anything, you know, a proposed trail or improvements to an existing trail, then we would go through that same exercise with the Conservation Commission.
Yeah, yeah.
And that whole arm's length, even though you're cousins, you know, you're both committees within the town of Walpole, you still have to jump through the hoops that they've set. which is the-
But
which is the
those
right thing.
hoops are set by the state.
Yeah.
You know, it's,
So-
Yep.
So that 190 feet cost you for surveyors, how much again?
1,600.
So how would we do the town forest and survey that? I mean, you know, the electric land or, I mean, so if you did a lot of land, does it cost in the thousands? Because we have some virgin land that we're interested in to go through that the town owns.
Not sure. To be honest with you, I didn't budget for that survey. That's part of my overage.
But you wouldn't be building
So-
a boardwalk.
Yeah, what makes the survey
No, no, but,
necessary?
would
Oh,
you
in
have
this
to
case,
have
I
a
was
survey-
disturbing.
Yeah,
I
would
was
you
dr-
have to have a survey for a new trail going through virgin land?
Depends on, I think, well, that would be a question for your conservation commission. Like, for example, if all you wanted to do was, rest a couple of, pressure-treated timbers on muck, so people could get across, you would go to your Concom and say, this is what we wanna do, and they would probably say, don't worry about it. If you start excavating and making permanent improvements, then they may require a notice of intent.
So a movable bog crossing would probably not be a big deal, but a permanent structure like a boardwalk would probably require a survey, it sounds
Yeah,
like.
Even a trail, they'd be probably concerned about.
Trail, which is clearing and on
Just
land?
clearing? I don't think so.
Well,
If you have.
But,
For a surveyor,
But-
to have to shell out
Yeah,
money for
yeah.
a surveyor, I think is
Yeah,
is the
I'm
concern.
worried about that, there's
Yeah.
10 grand to go
Right.
through 50 acres or something.
I think the survey, and Gary knows more about this than I do, but is necessary for like, again, the permanent type situation.
Yeah, because this project needed the filing of a notice of intent, and that required the survey. So if the project going through, creating a trail through virgin land, if that requires a
right
notice.
here, you gotta show them exactly where it is, you gotta have the points, all that, for the survey, it can get you all of that, because it's a permanent structure.
Exactly.
But that's, and we've kind of talked about that in Norwood, most of, like, we have an inventory of existing trails, they're not, like, we've never really, like, to call these trails, they're not really
Quote
well,
unquote
they're not
trails.
really accessible, they're not really maintained on a predictable basis that leads to, like, outdoor and passive recreation and enjoyment of it as a trail. It's more like conservation property that there's an effort to maintain the quality of the land, but not necessarily make it trail accessible. So we're going to that trail accessible stage. There's a difference between creation, like you guys already said, difference between creation and maintenance. And the maintenance is what we're looking at from from
First
an
step,
immediate
yeah.
stage. But then you've got other longer range projects like creation that you really have to put a timeline, like you've said, you had a plan, you went out and did the work, the surveying, you had a long timeline. How long was that?
From,
Soup to nuts to develop it?
well, the grant application had to be in on February 1st of 17. I got notified in September of 17. We did the work between May and November of 18, so almost 2 years. Yeah, and that doesn't count, like, there's probably 4 to 6 months of planning even before we started the grant application.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
And you had enough volunteers to build it?
yeah,
We probably could have had a lot more volunteers, but I think Gary wisely limited the number of volunteers, because you get 20 people out there, it's almost chaotic, and what's everybody gonna do, and a lot of standing around, and, 4 people on a day, on a shift, 5 people, sometimes a couple more, sometimes it was just Gary and one other guy, was probably better than having 10 people, I think, honestly.
and that was,
Muck.
How did we
That's
get
how
through
you
it?
Anchor it into.
Oh, it's just like the piers and the, yeah.
Lee may have a picture that would,
Machine on-
Well,
on-
so I tell you what, I'm gonna call it timeout, let's not get into that level of detail, because we're stealing their time, so we want.
well, that's fine.
Thank you. Sorry.
We're happy to do this.
Mucking it up, yeah.
Yeah.
There's some point I
Good one, Jerry.
wanted to make.
So that map packet that you made, is that all done by you, or did you have?
Okay, so
professional
that was
do
what
it?
I was gonna get at, is as far as improvements, Gary, and the marking of trails, and, I thought you might wanna go through and explain some of the numbers, and explain how the map came to be, and sort of what some of it means. Is that kinda what you're getting at?
Oh, just the,
So
that one, is that
this-
something
did
you
you create
made
that? Oh, this one,
yourself
okay.
together?
You get that, okay.
Yeah,
Or did
there
you-
was some deadline, there was some reason I did this.
So you did
and-
it personally, you had the
Yeah.
talent to do that?
Yeah.
In the software or
Thank
whatever?
you, thank you very much, I'll take that as a compliment.
We
So-
have to have one on our committee.
She's not.
Hey, she's not here tonight?
That's why she's not going.
So, yeah, this is like cutting and pasting, that
Yep.
wasn't that hard.
But the cost is high.
But the $6,
That's
$6 a copy.
Yeah, it's
So
all-
late, I don't know if I finished the thought, but lately when we have a town event, I put a sign up that says, these are free to take, but It's 15 cents a page times 15 pages or whatever it is, and it comes out to $6 a piece. Only take it if you plan to use it. But still, I spend a lot of money each year. These are $1 a piece, because they're 11 by 17 color, folded.
But you used your GPS, everything to.
Actually, at the
create-
time, I didn't.
Okay.
I'm not sure which of these are GPS. I think not many.
Okay.
But I know the trails well enough that I could just sort of draw it.
Yeah.
But so this, actually, I did use GPS. I learned, I learned how to use QGIS. There's ArcGIS, which is a commercially available product.
Okay.
I didn't want to buy that.
Yeah.
So QGIS is it's like the Mozilla of GIS software. It's free,
Okay. Yep.
open source. So I went to a couple classes, and they showed me how to do it. And then, so I work at MIT.
Okay.
MIT has a GIS library,
Yep.
which has staffed hours. So I would go there with a question, and and sometimes they would explain it, sometimes it would go
Just
over
do
my
it.
head. But, having that resource was
At the end of
invaluable.
the day, they go, here you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of what I was
Um,
getting at, yeah.
Lemon drops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a motion that Sue attend these classes.
So sitting around the table, we've got, Fran has done a lot of the trail work and GPS, and she's forwarded, we can't technically get at it tonight, but, so Fran's done that. Craig has created a couple of brochures. We had, a Boy Scout Eagle project back 10, 12 years ago, created a pamphlet for one of the properties at Endine down in, off Lower
Yeah.
Washington Street.
Oh, yeah.
Love ending.
So, Craig took that one and duplicated that for two of our other properties, and it's very similar to one of your pages here, where there's some amount of content, and then there's a map and there's an overhead, so we've done that. John,
Smaller version of these,
Yeah.
really.
yeah,
Craig is a
John,
GIS guy for the state.
John.
Oh, wow.
Is that right?
Okay. Okay.
John likewise has done,
Yeah.
a fair amount of GPS work.
GPS, yeah.
Yep.
Phone,
So that's,
phone GPS.
so I think one of the, we could be here for hours, but one of the things that we're trying to basically steal from you is essentially, where can we start from the standpoint of, there's a lot of talent around the room, and you guys have already been there, done that with all of your talent. So now it's a question of, what do we, bite-sized chunks, if we were to form a subcommittee to put together something like this for all of our trails, or maybe not all of them, but just pick the top 5 or
The ones
7 or
that
10 or whatever.
we decide to publish, yeah.
So we could put together a packet, something like this, and preferably, I don't know if you have that accessible through the Facebook page, maybe?
It's on the Walpole, Town of Walpole, website.
Okay.
So I can give you so each one of these is its own PDF, each page. I can send that to you if you want,
Yeah, something,
and you
sure,
can
we
distribute
could
it.
circulate
Send it
that.
to Joe.
and this
Yeah.
as well.
Okay.
Okay.
That would be great.
The other thing that we're trying to get, that you guys are pushing, advocates of the community involvement, community enjoyment of the properties. Your outreach on Facebook, if we can just wrap up and go like 5 more minutes, and if you can just tell us, ultimately, the last question of the day is, how can we help you?
Yeah.
So I would just keep that in mind.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
I have to say, Glenn taking on Facebook was something that I wanted to. I have my own Facebook account. I created one for the town forest and for the trails committee, and it's just one more thing. It was never my favorite thing, and thank goodness for Glenn. He has a knack at it. It takes a person, and I just didn't want it. I'd rather be out in the woods. So-
My observation about Facebook is attention spans of, I don't know, the younger generations, I don't know, maybe I'm one of them, maybe not anymore, but is very short. And so anything that's like long and complicated tends to just gloss over, and people move on to the next thing very quickly. There's too many other options out there. And so pictures are good. I posted a picture of a bald eagle, got a lot of feedback on that. It was on the Neponset River. I've had like a 2-sentence, come hike the Indian and Pinnacle Trails, check out what you might see, and just kind of left it at that, and, you know, that's a good way to get some outreach and get some feedback, and to actually reach people, and people might not even know that the Pinnacle Trail is there, because I'm back there every day, you know, every day, and I hardly ever see anybody, and so it's just another way to introduce trails that have been there for years, but people just might not be hiking. Somebody, I don't know, somebody, an organization that I think does it better than us, that I've been watching and I've been trying to copy a little bit, is Moose Hill. They have, I think, once a month, and in December, January, February, you know, the nicer months too, of course, but they have, you know, regular hikes that are guided by a naturalist, you know, and they're posting, you know, 3 times a week, pictures, and just encouraging people to get out and hike. They do lots of events. I think they had a, you know, come look at the stars. You know, they set up a telescope, and so they do it a lot better than I do it. And so I'm trying to take what I learned from them, and perhaps you could do the same thing. And they probably have somebody who's really dedicated. Again, if you're posting 2 or 3 times a week, that's, you know, that's a lot. That's a lot. But if that's what people want, then that's a good way to reach them. And so just anything you could kind of highlight a trail of the day, and you know, you could put it all out there at once, but that might almost be too much. If you could highlight one single trail, one single event, you know, and just sort of focus on that at a time, that might capture the short attention spans. I mean, that would be my.
And what's the page? What's the Facebook name of the page?
It's Walpole Trails. I got rid of the word committee. I just like the branding aspect of it, but you know, Walpole Trails, you can find it. And we'd love for anybody on TV or in this room to like us and follow us.
And I'm sorry, what's the name again?
Walpole Trails.
Walpole
Walpole
Trails.
Walpole
Yeah.
Trails,
Okay.
yeah.
Do you do Instagram too?
And
I don't, and we should, but you know, that's certainly, my wife is more sophisticated and has told me that I need to, and so that's what I probably will.
And my daughter's Instagramming all the time. If that's the right word.
Yeah,
I don't-
I think you got it.
Yeah, yeah. So, I just want to say, we've never done a New Year's Day hike until a couple months ago. Glenn came up with the idea in December, mid-December, I think. Want to do a first day hike, and publicized it on Facebook. We had a scout leader there in charge of the bonfire. She estimated we had 500 people attend.
great.
My wife and I estimated 250. Regardless, we had hundreds of people show up.
It was
With an
60
event that
degrees. It was 60 degrees on
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
January
Where-
1st,
where
yeah.
It was
That might have helped.
It was
but-
what we did was we met at Jarvis Farm, went across the boardwalk. The idea was to cover as much of the town forest as we could. And the town forest has 2 parcels which are, you know, sort of oriented like this. One goes north and south, and the other one goes sort of east and west. So we started here, went across the boardwalk, went across Washington Street, through the town forest, up to the high school, up this way,
Wow.
and then back.
Oh, nice.
So we, 2.5 miles.
It was 2.5 miles, yeah.
Yeah, and we stopped and pointed out points of interest and so forth, but.
It highlighted the boardwalk. Now, everyone knows, Blue Hills does a first day hike. They started it in, I think, the 90s, and it's spread nationwide, and it's a big thing, and me and my family would go to Blue Hills every January 1st, and, you know, it's kind of nice to not have to drive to Canton, you know what I mean? And
Yeah,
good luck
have it
with
in my
those.
own backyard. Thanks.
Sure.
So, you know, if you had a goal, you know, if you were interested in having a trail, a piece of Norwood that you wanted to highlight, you have a few months to, you know, 10 months to organize something like that.
So you had a bonfire,
The woods here, I found when I talked to the fire department that they don't like the word bonfire, that's, the word bonfire to them is like a rejection waiting to happen. And so I started out with the words bonfire, but maybe what we ended up doing was a barrel fire, a half barrel.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was
Controlled burn.
a controlled burn, the
And
terminology
the scouts were in
matters.
charge of it.
Yeah,
Perfect.
Boy Scouts were in charge of that.
We were able to lead different, I mean, we split up into 4 groups.
Well, so, and again,
Or even more.
something that we didn't, this was our first year, my plan was to exactly copy Blue Hills, because I didn't want to reinvent the wheel.
yeah.
And so have a noon hike, you know, meet at 11, have hot chocolate, which was donated. The hike cost us nothing, 500 people, and we didn't spend a penny.
That's awesome.
But meet at 11, hike at noon, but what we found is at 11, there were 100 people there, and at 11:05, they were like, when are we leaving? I'm like, in 55 minutes. Nobody
what we
wanted
publicized.
to wait, everyone wanted to go, and so
Yeah.
we ended up doing 4 tiered
Yeah,
hikes, and, you know, because the people were showing up at 11:55 as well.
yeah.
So I didn't realize it was gonna play out that way, but, yeah.
Well, that was a good problem.
Yeah, that was a good problem.
Yeah,
Yeah.
success.
It's amazing. It was just, the turnout was absolutely amazing. People from Bridgewater, Attleboro, all over.
Yeah, so
Just amazing.
I don't know what would happen if it was 20 degrees, but I imagine people, I didn't care if 20 people showed up, 10 people, I wouldn't have cared, I would have hiked either way.
Yeah.
But yeah. So,
Good.
Well, this is great, I'm sure we could fire off hundreds of other questions, but, so what can we do to help you guys?
Well, any of your trails come close to Walpole?
Yes.
And Dean.
And
Dean.
Indian?
Dean will be
And
great.
Dean ends at Milot Street.
Where the soccer fields are, your
Yeah,
soccer fields.
Which would connect, we'd have to be on surface streets for a very short period through the estates there, but
Right.
we have a trail at the
Yeah.
bottom of, I forget the name of the
Yeah,
street.
where you-
This
where
is
It's,
Joe.
I
Roberta
think,
State
Mansion
is right.
Drive.
That one?
The Berta State is in Dean?
This is the end
Yeah.
and that's
So
the
Mansion
Mylars,
Drive-
I see it.
Yeah, we just have to go across the street.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
well,
I could see my lot on that top or bottom, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And how long is
Right-
that?
Right in here.
that's great,
It's a
fantastic.
series of trails too.
Yeah.
Coakley
I think
School.
the longest one, we've identified it, can't show it to you tonight, but, if we really wish.
It would be, I guess, the end of this.
We do have,
between
we've identified
Stockton
4 different trails, different lengths and
And our trail is,
abilities, I guess, but the longest trail is probably 1.75 miles.
That's cool,
And
that's
that's the
great,
most developed trail system in all of
Yeah.
it now.
that's wonderful.
Indian Trail.
Matter of fact, cross-country team has competes there,
Oh, yeah,
so,
so it's well maintained then, I'm
yeah.
sure.
Our,
What's the
The-
next page? Maybe the
Oh,
next
it's
page?
not connected, those are just other trails.
Oh, those are, okay.
But
Um,
if you go down,
How about out
right
front?
here,
yeah, see, our,
right here, it's
our-
right there, it's
yeah.
right there.
Right.
You just cross the street and
This
there's the
trail
estates and
for
stuff
us
and the, yeah.
would be just about here someplace.
Okay.
So
Along
without,
the river there.
without a lot of
Yeah,
heavy.
yeah,
so
exactly.
that's-
And in fact, one on the north side of the river, and then, the pinnacle is actually 18 acres here. This is a mile, this is Washington Street. So,
The Pinnacle is my
Yeah.
backyard, so I'd love to show you all the Pinnacle too, but, yeah.
So that's, that's certainly one possibility, is actually, abutting, adjoining trails. Even if there's, like you said, even if there's
a bit of walk,
a
I
bit
mean,
of a walk on the street
Yeah.
or whatever, that's great.
Plus, you know, funding, if we, possibility of funding,
Great, thank
if we do that.
then it becomes a regional
Yes,
Right.
thing as opposed to just a town thing.
people leaving because they have another meeting, that's all.
Okay.
The other alternative is if we could get together at some point and maybe, I don't know if you guys get in touch on a regular basis, but, if we could have.
We've been threatening to.
If we could have basically, joint efforts or joint walks or whatever, we'll go see Jarvis. We'll take you a walk on Endine or something.
I love it, yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever, if you guys have commute, so that would be another avenue that we could kind of, we'll check out yours and you check out ours and all that kind of stuff.
So we just recently signed on to do a monthly walk at the senior center. That's Friday at 11 a.m. I'm not sure if that's an option for any of you folks.
So is this the first one this Friday? 'Cause
No,
it's
actually, the first one was last Friday.
Okay.
We're doing it on the
Second Tuesday.
second Friday. Yeah,
So
so
the 8th of March.
yeah, so February 8th, I gave a talk on the history of the Walpole Town Forest. We had 35 people show up, and then that Friday was rainy, but still, and now it's senior center, so senior audience. We had 20 people go on the walk, which followed the talk. It's 20 people, 20 seniors in the rain was fantastic as far as I was concerned.
A
So
lot of good feedback on that.
So March 8th at 11 a.m.
at the senior center, yeah.
11 a.m. is when the hike starts?
The hike, we did the talk at 10,
Yeah, that's right.
and then the hike at 11.
You still do the talk every,
Yeah, because I did a series of articles, historical articles about the town forest.
yeah, so you're the genius of the town park.
I'm the layman that committed himself to work with the Historical Society. And they were a tremendous help. So it just, it takes time and effort to gather the information and then turn it into a newspaper article. It was in the Walpole Town Forest. But anyways, I was the guy that wrote them. My neighbor's an editor, so he actually edited them for me, and then we published them. So I'm just going to sort of talk about different segments of the history.
And then
You work with? Do you work with the Historical Society much?
I did at that period. Now it's more infrequent, but I still do.
I think it's a good idea. There's
Well,
a lot.
they're interested in doing
Yours
something
is?
with us.
Yeah, I'd love
Yeah.
to reach out to Walpole because I know less about Pinnacle, but I know that there's possibly some Indian history there that I'm not aware of, or some of it's lore to me, and I'd like to actually get the historical perspective, so that'd be awesome if you guys did that.
Where's Pinnacle?
Pinnacle is in East Walpole, so Washington Street, is it the old Hoagie Bear factory? It's
Yeah.
actually on the other
One that
side.
would connect to Indian.
Yeah, Indian, so it's on the other side of the Neponset. It's essentially mirror to Indian.
Is that rock up there, is the pinnacle?
That would actually connect you to Indian, but if you went up Plimpton, it would take you to Indian. There's a trailhead, so there's stairs that actually connect with Plimpton Street.
Okay.
It's just on the other side of the Neponset River.
Yeah.
So so we're talking about a trade mission,
Mhm.
right? We also have had discussions with our own senior center to develop, we've offered them a couple of other trails. They have one trail that frankly, even they don't know if people use it, but they have it available, as a walking, it's mostly sidewalk walking.
Mhm.
But we've offered them a trail that would lead into the woods behind their facility here in Norwood.
Mhm.
And no heavy lifting, but it's probably a mile to a mile and a half, some of which is sidewalk, some of which is, easily,
Traverse through the woods.
It's not
and stuff, yeah,
uneven
woods.
terrain
Yeah,
to an
right.
extreme, yeah.
Yeah. But certainly if Vic is great at trade missions himself, so he's our emissary in a lot of different ways, but if that's something we could, join up with you, that would be great.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I will send you an.
How about, like community, work parties? Like I do Bay Circuit Trail work parties, and Lee does as well.
Mhm.
I also go over to Blue Hills, but do you guys have like a work party day for the community?
Not formally scheduled.
Okay.
We did in advance of the Town Forest 100th anniversary, because we wanted to raise the profile. Last year, the entire year or more was spent on the boardwalk, so I guess we're at a new beginning.
I would say
We're,
so.
so we're starting with a clean slate.
Yeah.
Until
and-
another emergency comes up.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, like,
Trees.
who knows what's out there? I haven't gotten any calls or
Yeah.
emails yet, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, these last couple of days could have been,
Any final words of wisdom, recommendations?
no, I think, so, you have somebody that likes to walk in GPS. You have a GIS guy.
Fran likewise is a
Fran-
walker.
Fran
Well,
GPS,
remember
yeah.
he
Follow
works,
John.
yeah.
Yeah, he's
So,
good. He's the GIS
You
guy.
have all the skills needed to do this. So, it's time consuming, but if you can delegate the work, then it makes, more manageable bites for all involved. And the end result is it's a valuable asset to have. If you're in the process of forming a trails committee, then you need something to show people, hey, these are the trails,
Yeah.
and, certainly put your own signature on it, your own stamp, your own design. This,
Yeah.
and if you want to copy this, that's absolutely fine. So,
I'm just
yeah,
curious, how do you do your outreach now? Do you use Norwood Now? How do you reach, how do people know about what the
or
Norwood
you
Trails
do,
are doing?
or too early in the process. Maybe.
Right, yeah,
We
fair
do,
question.
Well, we're televised also,
Right,
so
yeah, of course.
We,
national
go
TV.
ahead.
Okay, okay.
Tens of thousands.
2 a.m.
You're competing with the masked singer.
So we do-
Okay.
So we had kind of not a misstep, but a one step forward and an equal step backwards last fall as far as Facebook and even just having a presence on the town website. We don't have either of those, but we're very active, and if anybody asks a question on Norwood Now, for better or for worse, Norwood Now is an exciting place. I don't know if it sounds like you've been on there,
Yes,
but
I have, yeah.
but people ask, I'm new to town, where can I take my dog? Are there any walking trails in town?
Can't answer.
Are there any walking trails in the area? And everybody's like Blue Hills, Adams Farm, Noon Hill, and then we're like, hey, what about us?
Yeah, right,
Right,
yeah.
so we jump in there, and we do have a couple of PDFs, we've got similar to your front page here, we do have a town-wide map that
Awesome.
we actually presented last week.
Yeah.
physically presented, but it's available electronically.
Yeah.
And then we've got a couple of maps of specific, the Yendine Trail, on the site as well.
Yeah.
So, but,
I mean,
but we
that's-
don't, but we're basically piggybacking on Norwood now, so
Gotcha,
far.
gotcha. So,
Yeah, we did a seminar a couple weeks ago at the library, and we had a sellout crowd.
that's awesome.
Yeah, so
Like
we,
75 people.
That's a lot.
so we,
That's fantastic. The
we did have
interest
a
is there.
booth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We did have a booth at Norwood, our Norwood Day in September.
Okay.
At that booth, we got about 175 contacts and emails, addresses.
Yeah.
We got another 75 roughly last week at at this library event.
yeah.
Jeez.
We've sent out one newsletter last month. The town's going through an open space master plan revision,
Okay.
rewrite. So we sent out a newsletter to 200 people saying, there's a week left. We'd appreciate your input. Go out to, we included the link in the email.
Yeah.
Go out to the link and take the survey and whatever comments you have. So we're trying to get into that mode of a regular, predictable newsletter type.
Well, I would just wanna make sure that we were privy to, any events or anything, any progress that this committee made. So if we could put our email addresses
Yeah,
and that,
sure.
and
Yeah.
somebody just thought to email us
Yep.
individually, I'd be interested in,
Yeah.
and I could do the same back to you.
And we have the new email address for the town too, so.
And what would that be?
trails@norwoodmont.gov.
Okay,
trails@norwoodma.gov, right.
Yeah.
And that falls on Lee's mailbox and my mailbox.
gotcha.
Oh, okay.
And we have had
.gov.
several.
.gov, yeah.
.gov,
Just like,
right.
Don't forget mine.
just like Walpole.gov.
We did have.
Walpole has a hyphen.
We did have a
Oh, yeah.
presentation,
We don't
one of,
have that.
one of the things we're gonna spend a couple minutes talking about after this is, we had a presentation last week at the library, and after that presentation, we got four direct emails into this email address asking for further information, so. It's just all about that outreach things.
Yeah.
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 You're doing a
lot of
great
times
job.
we're covered by a reporter here for the meeting, so he usually writes something up.
It's
for us.
Yeah, free weekly newspaper,
Okay.
town newspaper.
Yeah, and we have two of those. We have Hometown Weekly and the Walpole Times actually is a subscription. Yeah, you have to pay for that one. So the things I'm gonna give you are PDFs of this, and I'll leave these copies.
Yeah, leave these, yeah.
On page 7.
PDFs of the Trails Guide and the Town Forest Map. The text that I have on the coyotes that I got from the animal control guy. The notification of the senior walk, which will be the 8th, March 8th. And that's,
Great.
The
that I think
Lyme
is it.
thing, you had the Lyme.
The Lyme disease, that actually came from the health department. So I can see, they should have a PDF of that.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
printed on both sides, so,
We have-
right.
Our health department, Segal, has a brochure downstairs
Okay.
that's, I don't think it's available online through them, but we could certainly post it ourselves.
Lyme disease, so ours is like, it's a wallet-sized card, it's printed on both sides, so I'll get that to you. Disease card, PDF.
And then, as I said, if you can think of other ways that we can give you guys a hand or advertise things like Walpole is May?
Walpole Day is
It's in May.
I think I just
It's the
actually
third
saw an announcement
Saturday.
about it.
third Saturday in May, I think.
And you would have some presence. the
Yeah,
Trails
well, we
Committee-
would have a,
Have a table?
we would have a tent
With
because
extended
it's
family.
guaranteed to rain. It's-
Oh, that's what,
Uh,
that's how it works?
Yeah,
Ours is,
Yeah.
Yeah.
we only have
Jerry
Thursday.
actually,
So I got
Jerry
it.
actually founded Norwood Day here in Norwood. so-
oh, okay.
Oh, did you?
wow.
It actually is May 11th, just put that
Oh,
out
it's
there.
May 11th,
Walpole Day,
the
yep.
second.
That's what I have here in my phone.
That's our recycling day.
May.
Oh, it is?
Hazardous waste?
Okay, great.
Yeah, and vice versa, obviously the offer is
Yeah.
there as well,
Great.
for whatever we can do to help, and I can put it on the
Yeah, May
Facebook page, an
11th.
event you have, and I'm
Yeah,
happy to do it.
great. All right.
We could do a
But,
trail
so let's
celebration at the top of the
Try to do a
list.
hike from your
Just the coyotes.
Indian to ours. We
Yeah.
should try to
Yeah,
link
we could
those.
try to
That
do
seems
it
like the
this-
closest approach.
Sure,
Mm.
that's great.
Um,
Good. And
so-
then maybe we can find a rehydration spot afterwards.
Yeah, there's two.
I understand.
There's two really
Yeah.
close to that.
Somewhere down there, Moore Street.
Yeah, maybe.
Oh, yeah, we may go there.
We're gonna have a meeting,
We-
possibly have a
we're
Walpole
gonna
Trails Committee
dis-
meeting.
have a
yeah.
discussion after. Well, all this is still fresh.
Great, well, you guys can certainly stay,
Thanks, guys.
but
Thank
we
you very
appreciate
much.
it.
Yeah, no, thanks for having us,
Feel
that's
free.
great, thanks, Joe.
Good.
So, guys, thank you very much.
That was a
Thank you.
long half hour for you guys.
You know,
Yeah,
good, that's-
I'm gonna keep you here late tonight, sorry about that.
Thank you.
It's a good thing we didn't get wound up.
Can I keep it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
this is for you to keep.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, keep it, it's okay.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so-
Thanks, guys.
You too, guys. See you.
We'll see you out on the trail.
So I only remember three names: Joe, Lee, and Vic.
Yep.
Jeff, Jerry,
Fran.
Fran,
Marguerite.
Marguerite,
John.
John. Nice to meet you guys. And
Thanks,
thank you for
guys.
your time.
Yeah, good luck, thank you.
Vic, Joe, Marguerite,
Fran.
Fran, and John.
Good,
Thank you.
thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
All right, great.
Joe, did we introduce a new person here?
Empty seat, you know.
Empty, so that's what
Okay.
happens.
So just as we put Fran on the spot, when Fran
Traditionally
first
do
came,
this, yeah.
yeah,
Oh, you are, oh, good.
Fran actually had to stand up on top of the table, sing a song, and recite, yeah.
The table rookie.
So you've joined us tonight. You've come to the meeting.
You know,
Visit us.
I was extremely interested with my family. We've sought out every hike around, and you always go online, print out the things, but we've been all over. So it's just a fun family thing we've done, so I was interested.
Yeah,
You
great.
mentioned
Great.
so.
Thanks for coming. So we did, I don't know if we have what, we're gonna fly through these next 3 or 4 items here, but, last month we had crafted on the second page, I don't know if everyone has that, but on the second page, we had crafted a draft mission statement. So that top half of this, there's a bottom half, that did not make the cut, that's the way we labeled it, but, so the top half of this, I guess we're proposing that, we adopt that as our mission statement going forward. We can always circle back and change it, but I think that encompasses, just as, Glenn and Gary were talking about outreach and education,
Good, thanks.
you know, the 3 E's. I was on the NOAA Digest show last week, and Vic, you said you had talked to a reporter.
Yeah, we should have a good article, next week.
So basically, we have three bullets essentially to the mission statement: educating the community on available multi-use trails and conditions, trail locations and conditions, exploring partnerships with organizations and businesses in the Norwood area and beyond, like the Walpole Trails Committee, encouraging community groups and individuals to enjoy the natural beauty of Norwood, like Marguerite and her family. So, I think, I don't know if anybody has any other comments, but I'd like to propose that we, without myself making a motion, that we publish this as our first mission statement.
Make a
Yes.
motion? Make a
Second?
motion to accept it.
Yeah.
Second?
Okay,
Any
great.
other discussion?
Further discussion now that we have a first and a second.
Um,
Comments, tweaking, always welcome.
It's stone.
Good, okay.
Continue the highlight in yellow.
I'm sorry?
It's highlighted in yellow.
It-
So we'll continue that.
Yeah, right. It's painted.
Maybe
too.
green.
Yeah.
Make it green?
Yeah, maybe. Okay, good. So what we'll do from there is just we'll send it over to Tony. I did Tony Mizuko, since we are the advisory group to the general manager. We'll share that with him, and we'll tell him what we've adopted here. I have already sent that over to him, as well as Paul Halkiotis and Pat DeShane, so they know, they've read the draft and they're comfortable with it, so we'll just make it happen. So, that's great, thank you. And as I said, we can circle back on this, you know, periodically. It might make sense once a year as we get rocking and rolling with life here in Norwood.
Sure.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda, February 13th Sustainability Series presentation. Vic and John, if you want to give us a quick summary of what you thought. It was, I'll just ruin the surprise and I'll say I've got all kinds of great feedback, and really appreciate what you guys did. Sue Bartlett also contributed a lot to the making it happen. It was very well received, and we're still getting favorable comments, so if you guys wanna,
I was up at the library yesterday for a presentation. I had several people approach me that had been at that presentation.
Oh, good.
Very positive feedback.
I was at a
Nice.
funeral, somebody approached me.
Wow.
See,
Well, I was
see,
at a funeral, somebody's head was
Yeah,
busted.
and it was funny because I'm friends with Donna Lane and, from the garden club and, you know, the Norwood Eden Garden Club also, as well as the community farm, garden. And, I called her up before and I said, you know, John and I are doing a talk tonight at the library. And she goes, oh, I can't do it, I got a conflict. So she never showed up. She says, I'll try, and then the next day she calls me up. She goes, you know, I just talked to the editor of, what's the monthly Norwood paper?
Oh, the one they mail?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody
Hometown
gets-
Weekly or something.
yeah,
Huh?
something, yeah.
Hometown Weekly.
Yeah, something like that. And she said, so I talked to the editor. The editor said, you gotta write a thing on the Trails Committee. Everybody wants to know about the Trails Committee.
Wow.
Great.
So last Sunday, I drove around for an hour and a half. I could've used another hour, you know, showing her all the trails and the possibility of trails.
Wow.
And so she wrote a nice article.
Good.
And
Alright.
they'll be coming out, you know, it comes out the first of the month, so it's a, you know, it'll have pictures and it's a lengthy article, so
Nice,
it'll be good
nice.
publicity, I hope.
Yeah.
Great.
Good follow-up from it. I
And
thought
then-
it was a great presentation. We met
Yeah, it
probably
worked
2 or
out
3
great.
times prior. Sue Bartlett helped put the
Yeah.
PowerPoint together with the pictures and whatnot.
Mhm.
And yeah, we kind of just traded off slides and different trails and got good feedback and input from the crowd.
And I don't think hardly anybody left, so it was a
Yeah.
good thing. And
Yeah.
they had a waiting list on that one,
Yeah, it was
which
good.
they don't usually have. So
Yeah.
it worked out great. So, and again, because of that, one of the members of the Norwood Historical Society was there. And she asked us to do another one,
Mm.
for the Historical Committee
Hmm.
in, April 25th, I think.
Okay.
She's finalizing it up, of course I'll be away,
Of course, you'll be away, but
but.
Yeah, of
I
course.
know. And, so that was, you know, pretty good opportunities from that one thing. Number one, the event was a success, but all the other things that are starting to happen now, people are really, it shows a real desire for the trails in Norwood. And so I'm excited about that. So I spent the last week in the trails, looking for the hidden gems of the town and all that.
Right, right.
nice.
Great. And that, so we obviously wanna thank Susan Clare and the Together Yes group.
Yes,
We
for
appreciate that.
inviting us.
They have a monthly talk.
Yes.
In fact, I just got the notice, about the upcoming talk,
Yes.
so that's great, but thank you. Thank you all. Sue's not here tonight, but.
Big thanks to Sue.
Sue as
Yeah.
well.
Team Sue.
Yeah.
So,
Great. And what's that, what'd you say? April 25th?
well, she's finalizing it,
Okay.
but she's gonna present it to the board. I said, of course we will.
That would
course
most
we
likely
will.
be, it'll most likely be the 24th of April. I think that's their
Around that,
their
she was
annual
saying, yeah.
meeting date.
Okay, oh, we get the
Would
annual
be-
meeting.
They usually look for like a 30-minute presentation.
Yeah, and we'll get a, notification. She's gonna call when she affirms it, you know. So I just took the liberty and said, one of us will do it, that's for sure, you know.
I have, on that end, to that end, and actually, that's the society.
Yes.
Norwood
You know,
Historical Society.
yeah.
I have had a few discussions in the fall with Patty Fanning. She's created, essentially several walking trails within town.
And they're
Histor-
very interesting. when you
historically
can do that.
relevant walking trails,
Yeah.
so that might be something we could do as well.
Yeah.
Just bring up in that conversation.
Yeah.
Great, okay. All right, Earth Day, speaking of April 20-something, John, you wanna tell us all there is to know about Earth Day?
Sure, yeah. Second annual Earth Day celebration in town. We have actually a few.
That's concurrent, we used to do them for years.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh okay.
And the reason it's the 28th instead of the 22nd is?
Yeah. So the actual Earth Day is the Monday after Easter.
This is
So
the Greek Earth Day,
this is
right?
the Greek Earth Day. Yeah. We're celebrating
Easter.
Earth Week. We have several activities planned, one of which is Earth Day. So we have cleanups around town, 9:30 to 11, and then the community picnic and fair, 11:30 to 1:30, town common. Last year we had a table at the community picnic and fair. This year it would be good to expand to trail cleanup. So there are going to be active cleanups already happening at the Haas Pool Playground area. If we wanted to add on cleaning up the Indine trails, that would be a fit for the Trails Committee. And there's also going to be a cleanup at the playground next to the Hennessy trails, Murphy Field. So there's going to be a cleanup at the Murphy Field. So if we wanted to go ahead and do the Hennessy trails as well and clean up those, that would be a good fit. Just want to get everyone's thoughts on that. That would be 9:30 to 11, and then from there, we would have probably other people already setting up the table at the common for the fair. So I was thinking
The fair is 12 to 2?
it's 11:30 to 1:30.
11:30.
So and it,
What's the fair gonna be
yeah, it's
entail?
yeah. So we have live music. We have a couple bands playing on the bandstand, and there's probably 10 or 12 different local organizations there. So town planners are going to be there, the DPW, the rec department, the scouts, and they're all going to have little stations. NWRA is going to be there. Let's see, we're going to have a fix-it table where people can bring stuff to get repaired. There's going to be a local beekeepers association. Charles River Running is going to be there. They're doing a plugging event, which is a Swedish thing where you run and you pick up trash at the same time. There's going to be 12, maybe 14 different tables all set up that people can go to and pick up some literature. Mass Save is donating a bunch of things that we can add to the Together Yes table. The Walpole Seed Library is going to be there. They give away free seeds for planting. So it's going to be a great event. The Trails Committee to have a table there as well. Hand out maps, talk about the different trails. It's fitting for an Earth Day event.
You've contacted Waste Management by any chance?
Waste Management, we have not, but maybe we should through
They give us
DPW.
They give us $1,000 every year we did it.
Oh, really?
Is that when they're trying to get the contract?
Well, they already had the,
And when you, just so we're clear, when you say they gave us, who's the
oh,
us?
the rec department, I'm sorry.
The rec department, right.
I'm sorry.
Okay. No, that's all right.
They were the sponsoring organization.
Yeah.
Well, we asked them about, first we asked them for a container to provide, for the trash, because we sort of circulated right around the Haas and the Indine area, in
Sure.
the fields.
Yeah.
And then we asked them if they wanted to be part of it, they want to be, play a bigger part, and they said, sure, so they gave us a check for $1,000,
Oh,
for like 5, 6 years in a row.
Awesome. Thank you.
Then we also went to some of the local people about the other businesses about providing food for the day, for the cookout.
Yeah. Yeah, we're in the process of doing that. Last year, there was a pizza place in town donated a slice of pizza for everyone that helped clean up the trash. Yeah, so over 200 people helped clean up trash over 10 different sites last year. So we're hoping for an even bigger turnout this coming year.
Ours started small, went big, went back to small.
Oh, yeah.
So you can concentrate, you felt like you weren't accomplishing a lot because you had 3 people here, 5 people there.
Yeah.
And if you were concentrated on one site, you really could see the difference.
Sure, yeah.
So hopefully, this will grow and there'll be.
Weather dependent also, yeah.
Yeah, we had amazing
Some
weather.
hamburgers and all
Yeah.
this stuff,
Yeah.
so-
We had amazing weather last year, so.
Great. And what's the date of that again?
So it is Sunday, April 28th. Given there's a lot of planning for it, so I'm part of Progress Nord and we're putting on the whole thing, organizing the whole event. I can't dedicate all of my time doing or leading the efforts, from the Trails Committee side of
Right.
organizing the Hennessy and the Indine and also the table and that sort of stuff. So I was thinking maybe it's a fitting time to have like a subcommittee, 2 or 3 people to actually lead that. I don't know if that's,
Yeah.
you need a motion for that or what, but
Do we have any volunteers for a subcommittee to that end?
We should, yeah. Is there a committee already formed that's really doing this, right? That's putting it all together
The sub-
besides you?
Oh, yeah, yeah, there's two of us.
So the subcommittee would be our subcommittee, so that,
Right.
that coordinates our
End of the bargain.
association with the day, so,
Jerry's on it.
yeah.
I'll go.
Okay, great.
Should be back.
Okay, great. And anyone else, subcommittees are always, we always invite anyone to join any of the subcommittees, but as long as, so we can tackle that. So just to give this, the newly formed, so, well, I don't think we need a motion for a subcommittee, but just to give the newly formed subcommittee some homework. So on, our next meeting is Tuesday, March 12th, so maybe you guys can come back with a couple of ideas and talk to John. We just heard a Reader's Digest version of the day, so maybe talk to John about some more of the specifics, and obviously we'll do whatever we can, including community outreach to our 250 or so community members, just to highlight that fact, so.
Is there an itinerary or minutes or anything that you can send us?
Yeah, sure.
So we decide- See where
Yeah.
you are, what you've already done, what you've accomplished.
Yeah.
So you want retracing it.
Yeah, I can definitely send you some information as far as the
Okay.
specifics are concerned. What's that?
At my house.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, perfect. Sounds like a volunteer.
I'm not gonna be at the next meeting on the 12th, but you guys are welcome to, present to this group, activities between now and then. And I can send you a quick email of the things we're looking for and how to set it up
That'd
and
be great.
point being the point person in the cleanup effort and the community picnic and fair and what that entails. Yeah, so there's two of us right now.
I have volunteer for
So
this.
through Progress North, there's two
Okay.
members that are basically planning the Earth Day, and we've
Because I was
extended it.
involved in last year's.
Yeah, so this whole side of the
All right,
table
so you-
is volunteer.
It doesn't
a good-
stop there, it goes right
Yeah.
around.
The more the merrier.
That committee subcommittee is growing and growing. Okay, great, thank you. So,
Sorry, so I just need to know
Yep.
who I'm gonna email. So you three, sorry, Fran or
so who wants to
Yeah,
be,
so
who wants to
five.
take,
Anybody that is, just like
Who wants to
Jerry.
take-
Subcommittee.
who wants to take the lead on the subcommittee?
Jerry's the chairman because he has done it through the recreation
Okay.
department for many
Okay,
a
motion
year.
made, I think I heard
I
a
second
second.
it.
Chairman, because he never shuts up.
yeah, but are you even gonna be here on April 28th? Or are you
I'll
traveling?
try to come back.
I'll
yeah.
try to come back.
Yeah.
What a guy. All right, so far.
Yeah,
So
great.
I'll email Jerry and we'll go from there.
Perfect, thank
Thank you, Jerry.
While we're talking, we'll skip around a little bit while we're talking calendar, so we've got Earth Day on April 28th. We did talk about in April to sometime in the late April or early May, to have a community work party, which is essentially pick a property and similar to what you're doing at Earth Day, but specific to the Trails Committee, is we would pick a location and then put out a notice that starting it from 9 to noon, let's say, come on down and help us either pick up trash or do some very, very, very light lifting. We're in the process of trying to form that as a acceptable task within our group, both legally and how do we get it cleared and how do we get town government essentially to approve something like that. Once we have that in place, I think this community work day would be, a logical follow-up to that. So more to come on that, but if anybody has specific ideas on what that community day could look like, let's put that on the next meeting's agenda, is to try to start planning something like that in the April to May timeframe. Maybe May, we'll
Yeah, I
get
think we should stay away from the Earth Day, we're so
Yeah.
close to where we're doing
Yeah.
the same
Right,
thing.
right.
good point. So we'll get Earth Day behind us,
Yeah.
take care of Mother Earth first, and then we'll move on to the Trails Committee outing.
Yeah, I think Al Getz mentioned at one of the meetings we were at trying to plan the Earth Day a few months ago. We said the best time for the trail maintenance is in the summer. So if we want to try to plan maybe a summer day where all the riverbeds are a little bit more dried out,
Sure,
Right.
good point.
trails are fully overgrown, you can work everything back more.
But then you can't see anything that's in, like right now, you walk the trails now, you see all the cans and everything.
Oh, true, yeah.
But right now they're frozen in, but
Mm.
if we had a preliminary thing before all the foliage comes out, because there is quite a bit on the trails.
Yeah.
Off the side of the trails.
That might make sense if you did it earlier, well before Earth Day.
Right, before everything leaves out.
Yeah.
Right. Well, we could certainly do it both, we could, like you
We
said,
could
we
do
could
it
do,
in,
we could
just
do
the
a dry
group
run
to do it,
ourselves, yeah.
Yeah,
And everybody, both ourselves and, folks watching from their couch, getting ready to take that next walk themselves.
yeah.
Um,
Bring a bag.
bring a bag, whenever you go out on a trail, bring a phone, tell somebody where you're going.
Hmm.
Bring protection for ticks and sun and foul weather.
Coyotes.
Bring a bag. Yep, so there's a number of care package recommendations that we have. But certainly the bag in this case is germane to this part of the conversation. But
Yeah.
that's another thing we need to do, and Gary and Glenn were talking about essentially letting people know what to wear and how to prepare for a walk.
Mm.
So maybe that's something else we can put on our agenda. Because people are always asking, what do I bring, where do I park, and that kind of thing, so.
Level of difficulty, what
Yeah.
to expect.
Yeah.
There's all types of-
Yeah.
there's
Great.
questions,
Yeah.
bias, there's-
So we,
Sorry, just one other comment. It would have been great to have something like this at the presentation that we
Oh,
did,
sure.
because a lot of the people afterwards were asking for the maps of all the trails that we went over, and the only real map we had was of
Yeah.
the Indine. But if we had something like this, I mean that, and I think Susan Claire from Together Yes mentioned that maybe she would want us back, next fall,
Yeah,
and maybe by then we would have something like this.
okay.
Good. good point.
Anyway,
Yeah.
sorry to jump around. Yeah.
No, that's right, even if it's,
And get the cost down a little bit.
even if we prepared, once we get a package like this, even if we prepared 5 to 10 just to circulate around, but ultimately, that's the kind of thing we want to have on the website, some
Mm.
website, or a Facebook page or something, and let people get their own.
How close are we to having the ability to do that now? Are we, in other words, if we turn around and tomorrow I bumped into an individual who said they'd be willing to pay for that, are we there, or we need, another month or 2 months before we really would have a package available?
Let's divide the response between the pay for part and the content, the materials. I think what we talked about tonight between John, Fran, and Craig, we've got in-house experts on GPS and GIS and mapping, and Craig has already generated a couple of brochures, so I think we're
On our way.
well on our way to putting something like this.
I assume we were, but I just
yeah.
don't, yeah.
We focused, Matt Costa back 10 years ago was the Eagle Scout that I mentioned, that put a brochure for the Endine. I don't know if anybody's seen
That's
that or
good,
not,
yeah.
but we actually have that on the
Yeah.
dreaded Go Now Facebook page in the files section. But Craig, and that's a two-sided brochure that the Conservation Commission hands out, but it had never been electronically available. But that's the kind of thing, if we picked, like Craig took that and he duplicated that himself, and then from there he created one for Hennessy, and then we said, okay, well, let's prioritize the rest of them.
Right.
So at this point, we have 2, but we could certainly do more.
Can
And
he
Sounds like
get a request winter aerials versus summer aerials where you can't see the trails at all, or can't even see the rivers?
That's an excellent question, I don't know how to do that, I'm sure he can.
Yeah, because I've
Yeah.
seen some that are winter,
Yeah.
and you see everything.
Right,
The
right,
summer ones, you don't even see the
Yeah,
trail.
right.
Yeah.
Never mind the
Yeah.
Ponce River.
good point.
Mm.
Yeah.
Next, we'll have to table Fran's presentation, but one of the other items here, completed walks, Fran and group, but Fran did just that, John has done that as well. Took a walk and forwarded and actually Sue had done that before.
Mhm.
Took a walk and forwarded the results of the walk, so, great
GPS results?
GPS.
This
Yeah.
is, this is very,
Yeah, I made just snapshots of it. I thought you could put it there, but I could
Sure.
pass these around. I felt like I had to catch up on all these
Oh, thank
walks. So, so I started just, whatever I did, I had my GPS on and just mapped them. If you notice, one of them I had, my Endine one, I had to stop and talk to Vic for 15 minutes.
That's all it was?
Was it a?
Yeah.
Like a half hour, I had to go back.
Okay, so actually,
If you don't mind me asking, what do you have for GPS?
I have a
You
Garmin.
just your phone, or
watch.
is it
and-
on your phone, or it's a
Actually,
watch?
it's a golf Garmin watch. It's
Oh.
but it tracks your.
It does, yeah.
Walking.
Sure.
So it you can send the maps to your phone or to your computer
Mhm,
afterwards.
mhm, mhm.
And it keeps everything heartbeat, all right, but you don't need all
You
that.
don't-
So I did 4 of them, 4 of the walks trying to catch up.
Wow.
Indian, you guys already have it well marked.
Yeah.
One interesting one I just did a couple weeks ago was, Vic, you were talking about doing along the,
Peswick.
well, I did Peswick also,
Yeah.
down, but I tried to do behind the power station,
Yeah.
starting there,
Yeah.
and then walking down towards Ledgeview, and I went on the other side of the river than you did.
Oh.
So,
How'd you cross the river?
well, I started behind the power station, and stayed on the Dean
Oh, that's the
Street.
right side.
Oh, I thought you went on the power side. So-
Yeah.
No, I went on the other side, so I could connect right to
The
Ledgeview.
Ledgeview side.
But that's the side we did.
Oh, you
Yeah,
did, okay, I
yeah.
thought you did the other side,
Yeah, no.
I'm sorry. So then,
And you found it okay.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, so you could walk along the whole river,
Yes.
cross the river a little bit, a
Well, we
stream.
didn't walk along the, we kind of were in the back, following the sewer lines, the Emmett, no, it's sewer,
Or
old sewer
behind
lines.
the power station, it goes along the
Let's
river,
see,
then
which
it
one is
connected
that?
to the,
We just
Yeah.
whipped it out and back.
oh, okay,
We
yeah,
didn't do the big loop.
Yeah.
Power lines are
So
way-
you've got, so on that map for Peswick to Peswick to Vanderbilt? is that what
Yeah.
you- or is
I
it-
didn't think that was too interesting.
Which one?
This is
Yeah.
great, I
Boring.
was halfway here doing this, I think, motion
Yeah,
for
but if
another
you went,
subcommittee.
And it was very wet, we went
Yeah,
after the
there was
rain,
one
and
part
we
you
couldn't get anywhere.
across, but if you
Yeah.
went, let's go to that one, Peswick to,
Vanderbilt.
Vanderbilt, yeah.
This is
There's
great,
one
this is great.
parking spot at
so you
Peswick.
went, you went
Yeah.
down the sewer line,
Yeah,
and, if you went under the,
started
the
here.
power lines?
power lines, and then to the right of the power lines, there's woods in there too,
Okay,
and there's not many trails, there was a few beer cans in there, so kids go in there, I guess, and then,
Old cars.
except for that one part, so if you went, down Peswick,
Mhm.
through, Noah Gardens,
yep,
and then you know that little pond there?
yep,
If you
yep.
took a right before that,
oh, okay.
and went on the power lines, and there was a couple boards, I know exactly where you're saying, you couldn't cross right there.
It was very, very wet,
Yeah, but normally, it looks like you can normally, because it's very high water, if you look
Yeah.
at the Neponset River now, it's very, very high in the Charles River.
Yeah.
Then you could cross there, and you went through the industrial complex, but if you kept on that, and you follow behind the buildings on the power lines,
Mhm.
by the river, and you come all the way down right to the canoe launch, which is
Okay.
at 100 Riverview, so it's quite a long hike there.
Okay, yeah, we
So
couldn't
it'd be
get,
right to the top,
we were all
Right at
wet,
top
we were
of
up
the
to our
map.
knees
Right at the
almost
very
in
top, yeah.
water.
Wow.
you'd be right at the very top of the map there.
That's where the
Okay.
canoe launch is, right
It was
there
up
at the
here.
top.
Yeah,
At the
at
edge.
the extreme top.
At the- right
So,
there.
and that's all dry there, there is that stretch of
Oh,
a little
here.
water there, but it's all dry under the power lines there, all the way to where the self-storage is. And right after the self-storage, there's that little part
Okay,
that's wet,
okay,
and I couldn't cross it either, so I turned around, brought my car over to self-storage, and I continued on all the way right to the canoe launch. So
Okay, that's
that's a good
good.
hike.
yep.
One,
Oh.
these are great.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are great.
The other one I thought was really interesting was the Germany Brook one, and I started at the Ellis Dam, and then just walked, past
That
the
long walk.
Cleveland, and then past West, was it Westover?
Westover.
Oh, you went that way, yeah.
Past Westover, and then up through the landfill, and then Germany Brook.
Yeah,
That was,
that's a good one.
Yeah,
And that's 5 miles.
5 mile back and forth.
and you know,
Wow.
I
Yeah,
was,
it was
Good
pretty
one.
good.
I was,
The landfill's really nice, if you can go to the top, and then you
Yeah.
can
were
see.
you there Sunday?
No.
Because of when I was with the reporter, I showed her, and, you know, I told her how we talked about the landfill at the,
Mm.
meeting, the seminar we had, and I look at the top, she goes, look at, there's people in the landfill.
It wasn't me, I was with
There was people up there, I felt so proud.
The solar panels aren't up there yet?
No, there's nothing up there,
They're not
just,
gonna start
just
that
grass and a
the
lot
late
of
spring.
deer,
Oh, they were supposed to, never mind.
you know, signs of deer, and that's
Mm.
why I was worried about Lyme disease. And then I went down the OCC Thursday night, and then people from the town were saying, what are you telling them to go up the landfill? There's coyotes there, you know?
I've seen a pack of
You know, and there's also Lyme disease and all that. But anyway, so if you, if you continued on past Father Max,
Mm-hmm.
and I found our old skating pond down there behind the pool,
Hmm.
and you come out
Oh,
right to
right
the
on. Yeah.
Savage.
Yeah.
White Mike's.
Yeah.
Oh,
You come, I never called it that. We come to you come out right to the Savage Center, but there's a couple, and there's a park there, and I came out of there right by where the kids were skating on the basketball court there, they were, you know, doing the rollerblading or whatever, and, they saw me coming out of the woods, it's like, I'm like the first person that ever came out of the woods in 100 years, you know, in the middle of winter. And then I also found that there's a path, you know, before the, right by the end of the Father Max thing, and you can go, and you can actually go to Irving Street, except there's a place you have to cross there too, that's water.
And that's
And
a
then I tried looking in back in Norwest Woods to see if I could see anything, but it's like Norwest Woods is built on water. I mean, I saw it's all swampy in there, because I was thinking, then you cross Winter Street, and I tried that, and that path leading to the One Upland, and then there's you know, you go the road a little bit, then you go into the woods again, and that would be the Forbes Estate. I mean, that's a big loop, and it wouldn't be much on the street or anything, but I don't think you can get behind Norwest Woods, it's just too swampy.
So what are we allowed
That's-
to map and what aren't we? I mean, you can't just walk on people's properties
Right.
and,
I
and
You
say this is
can,
a
but-
walking trail and make it a
Right, and
public trail.
Well, we'll look at where it.
Well, I
That's
mean-
why Margarita's here, so you know. Our attorney on record.
I know.
I mean, because I think on one of them was private property, but we
Yeah.
walked
So
next
they-
to the Neponset River.
right.
Because I looked at a
Yeah,
map
that was
later
the,
on and I said, oops,
that was
this is
Searing
someone's
family
backyard.
trust.
So when we're out, if we're doing work that's of the Trails Advisory Group, right? So you go out with family or by yourself and you don't have that hat on, but you're just enjoying nature, right? So if you're enjoying nature and you're unassociated with the Trails Advisory Group and you're not mapping or doing anything like that, within reason, feel free to do whatever you want. However, when we're acting as members of the Trails Advisory Group, we have to follow pretty strict guidelines, like no trespassing and no doing anything that's, you know, that you wouldn't want your elected officials to do, whatever that meant. But, you know, that, which is kind of scary, let me take that back. But we are acting in a more formal, representative way. So we just need to be cognizant of trespassing and,
Yeah.
you know, just having your wits about you and doing things that you would, think, it's like a lot of things, you need to be aware that you have more than one hat on at the same time. So if it's the case, that's why we're all here, one of the many reasons is that most of these trails aren't marked.
Right.
So, and I've done it myself, is you don't know where the trail starts and stops, or how to get from A to B. So sometimes you just have to kind of give it your best guess. And if that means that you're trespassing, then it's a learning experience, but, you know, it's,
If there's signs,
They
no
don't shoot at you.
trespassing.
if there's sign, right, obviously if there's signs, we need to find a different way to get there.
And you know, I was bushwhacking in behind the recycling place, on the Westwood side.
Right.
And that's dry there, I thought it was all wet, and I think I'm in the middle of nowhere, and I said campfire with all beer cans all around, you know?
That's similar to the discussion with the Walpole group.
Yeah,
I have talked to the Westwood Conservation
Yes.
Agent, and.
but that is all dry there, you know, so there could be trails in there, and then I saw when you cross Winter Street heading to Father Max, right where that turn is, see how it turns there? If you it turns to the right, if you put a trail right in there, and you cross Germany Brook there, then there's all that land, and that's all the Westwood land, and that
Right.
looked like the logical place to make a crossing, because it's the driest and it's narrow, it looked like a good crossing, it'd be simple.
Can you do me a favor? Pass that to me.
Oh, the time.
Right?
I was about to give you a.
Right. No, this is great, this is great,
Else did he
thanks,
go there?
thanks
I
for
went
sharing.
everywhere.
Thank you.
Okay, so
So I think
would I call Craig and Sue or email them?
Yep,
It's like
so-
to help them out or?
So this really sounds like another subcommittee.
yeah.
Okay.
So maybe the
Okay.
three of you, I
Okay.
guess I'd recommend if the three of you can put your heads together and just try to, you know, take a step back and what do we want to accomplish and what do we want to make available? And these are great.
Mhm.
You know, from here, from the map, we'd put on, okay, let's take a step back from the map itself and say, you've got distance, you've got some comments here, you've got, other comment pros and cons, this is great.
Yeah,
From,
I like what you've done.
It's a format.
Yeah,
it's
this is
a
great.
it's a format and a template. You
Yeah.
know, maybe add some
Okay.
pictures along the bottom and
yep, so we could, right, so we translate this from the map into the rest of the brochure, which is a little bit of history about the location, where parking is, whether it's ADA accessible, you know, scale of degree of difficulty kind of thing. We do wanna I've had a couple of conversations with, actually Susan Clare was one of those conversations. She has a friend who's, I don't remember what the disability is, whether it's, you know, she's on a walker, I can't specifically remember, but that's the kind of thing that we also wanna try to focus on at least one or two of the trails to make them ADA friendly, I guess is the best way I can describe that.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing, if somebody came to our electronic site, wherever that is, whatever that means, then they could just zip down the list and say, okay, well, let me try this one, because it seems like it's more user-friendly for my needs. You know, we could also have a little, dog-friendly scale, let's have like puppy faces, or 1 through 10, or whatever, I don't know, we could, whatever. But that, you know, this is a great start, and it definitely, anything, essentially with this whole Trails Committee thing, anything we can do is advancement. It's a good step in the right direction. Because right now, these don't exist, with the exception of the couple that we've created in the last
Yeah.
year, and that one from 10 years ago from Matt, these don't exist, so this is great. And that applies to Vic, the great explorer. John's been out,
GPS on him though.
John's John's
everywhere.
I know.
John's been out on his bike, so that's another aspect of it, is whether or not it's bike friendly, and to what extent we need to maybe limit biking,
yeah.
you know, maybe, just a
Maybe.
thought. We don't have to do
They're
it, but
reckless.
we would recommend it. But that's, yeah, so that's great, that's definitely another subcommittee in the works, so.
Maybe
can we-
first update in a month.
True. So-
The 26th meeting.
Yeah, so March 12th is our next meeting, Tuesday, March 12th at 7 PM here in Norwood Town Hall. The meeting after that is Tuesday, March 26th, likewise at 7 PM in Norwood Town Hall. So we'll have that second, so the first subcommittee on Earth Day is gonna come back on March 12th with an update. And then the newly formed second subcommittee, the, what do you wanna call
Well,
yourselves?
Fran's taking point on it.
Perfect, thank you,
Oh,
Fran,
On the map thing?
thank you for
Okay,
volunteering.
Okay.
map
This
thing,
is the
so-
map
so-
thing.
Right.
Trails.
So when you come back, you can come back with a
Okay.
name of your subcommittee. Some of these things, like the Earth Day is, you know, what we'd like to do, similar to, I mentioned this before, like the model school program, where you take the same approach and you duplicate it. So we could do Earth Day, you know, essentially what you guys just did on the sustainability series is, what do we wanna do, how do we wanna convey it, what message, what's the format, you know, what do we wanna accomplish? So that, and the same is true for the mapping, it's like, what do we wanna accomplish, and what, you know, what kind of feedback do we wanna, how do we help people and all that, so.
Yeah, timeline
That's good.
too.
Timeline would be great,
You know.
sure, okay. Thank you for volunteering.
So, Fran, do you have everyone's email? Do you have me,
I-
It's on
Sue?
the-
It's
and-
probably on the link that
Yep,
you sent
it
us here for the
Yeah.
meeting.
So whenever we send the agenda with the
Mm.
minutes,
Mhm.
everybody is on there. We just added, one new member is gonna join us, invited guest, I guess, is gonna join us at our next meeting.
Hopefully, yeah.
Okay, so for now, I'm gonna call you folks the mapping subcommittee, but you can come
That's a
back
good
with a
name.
better name. So we've kinda jumped around a little bit. Future group trail walks, dates, and winter strategy. So we just talked about Westwood, Germany, Brook. So that might be a good one for us to do next. We've had that on the calendar, but we just haven't gone out.
So that would be basically that one,
It would be an extension of that one into Westwood.
into West.
So maybe we start at the landfill or somewhere closer to Meadowbrook, to Germany Brook, and then we go northbound into Westwood, and then circle through, and, you know, I've done that walk through Westwood as well, and there are definitely,
You saw that campsite
there's definitely, I did see that, it wasn't my bear can.
on the tree, on the branches.
Yep, but, there are definitely some hazards and obstacles like
Yeah.
like Germany Brook,
Yeah,
but we'll just have to figure that out. But the
But-
the Westwood Conservation Agent, as I said, is very excited to have, she didn't quite give up on residents of Westwood, but she's very excited that anybody is looking to do something there.
but Germany Brook goes all way up, which I was surprised, so that whole land, and then it's behind houses, so
Yeah.
basically, we can be dry there and not have to cross Germany Brook.
Right, they do have, a water easement that leads almost up to, I forget the name of the street, but it's almost up to Buckmaster.
Oh, they
Buckmaster
do.
Pond. So there is a way to get from the landfill to Buckmaster through the woods.
Oh,
So that's our next adventure. Right,
okay.
so we'll just try to trade, sometime in March, let's say, sometime in the next 2 to 3 weeks, on a weekend, we'll try to get together for a group walk, whoever can make it. What else? And then what, maybe the next meeting as well, we'll try to flesh out the rest of the calendar more, make it more formal for the spring. We did talk about kind of jumping right outdoors and right into the springtime as soon as the weather is cooperative. So maybe we'll try to get a plan together for the whole, you know, between now and June 30th, let's say. Also, I did touch base with Marie Kidd, who's kind of the liaison with the Cleveland School Walk. We didn't put a date on the calendar, but that might be another early to mid-May walk before school breaks, but when the weather's more cooperative. So that's a walk that the elementary school science program and the science faculty got really excited at the opportunity to take the kids from the Cleveland, I think the 4th grade, from the Cleveland school, go around the corner to the newly cut trail, Nichols to Ellis trail. So that's only like a 300-yard. It's very short leg friendly. So the 4th grade would be a great group to go there. And then I just stuck annual town meeting. We don't really have a presence, and anybody that's been to town meeting, at some point, whether it's at this annual town meeting or some future town meeting, we are a advisory group / committee associated with the town, so at some point it would make sense for us to present ourselves, to introduce ourselves at town meeting. So May 13th might not be, because there's a lot going on between now and then, but that's the kind of thing that we're finding avenues, like Vic's cutting the tip of the sword as far as, opening up avenues, and John, between John and Vic, opened up the sustainability series. Lee introduced us to the Walpole Trails Committee and the Friends of Adams Farm. I've been on, last week, we taped NOAA Digest. So there was a 25-minute spot on trails on NOAA Digest. So those are the kind of things that we want to get, now that we have a real swanky mission statement, right? So everybody should, even if the only 3 things that you remember about the mission statement are the 3 E's, right? But that's the kind of thing that we want to try to reinforce whenever
We
we
should do the May 13th town meeting, do it
No.
first, why wait?
Yeah. I mean, even if we had a brochure on the table,
Yeah,
the front side is who we are, what we're doing,
Yeah.
the back side is the townwide map.
Yeah.
It can be as simple as that. We don't have to, Lee is great at public speaking, but we don't have to if we don't want to, right? So, but speaking of town, not to take more time, but I will, at town meeting, the planning department, I forget their new name, but the planning department has proposed a trail study as a project to the Community Preservation Committee. So that project proposal would assess and design a trail at University Ave. that leads from somewhere in the forest to Lost Brook, to the border of Lost Brook. So that's a lot of what we were talking about here tonight with Walpole, that same concept, and that's currently, there's a lot of moving parts to that, but that application is in the works, and if it's approved by the Community Preservation Committee, it'll go to town meeting in May to be proposed as, for a town meeting to fund it, approve it, and move forward with that.
Under the title of the Trails Committee.
Under the title of
Well,
the planning department is the advocate or the proponent of that project. We would be,
The recipient of the,
the community would be the recipient,
Right,
we'd be possibly one of the many stewards.
so I think, so the point I guess I'm looking at is, it's probably would be a good time at town meeting, when they say, we have any, committees that would like to report, whether we report or not,
Right,
at least to identify, as you as the chair say, this is our committee members that are here, so they can associate as to
yeah,
what's going on.
absolutely.
Especially if you're gonna bring forward the fact that if we get that grant, who's the trail committee, so,
Yeah, right, and that's
That's
the
a good
same,
idea,
that's the same thing,
um,
that's the same thing that you both heard, and all of us, I think, most of us were in attendance at the library last week. The first question is, you gotta be kidding me, I didn't even know we had a trail, where are they?
yeah.
Right? So if we were to introduce that as not only an introduction, like you said, but also as a segue into that application, it might be a good thing, so. And then we could just reuse that in other avenues. Cool, all right. But that's why I threw the annual town meeting with a question mark next to that.
So we take out the question mark?
We will now take out the question mark and we'll put that on the March.
Is that a formal
Agenda.
process where we have to get on the agenda for town meeting, or?
No,
No,
part,
they just asked for committee
Yeah.
reports.
yeah.
Oh.
So there's, 20 different committees at least in town. So it just opens it up. One of the articles is a report from town committees. And
Oh.
town committees may or may not, at their option, present
Most of
it.
them don't.
Okay,
But I feel for this particular one, because we potentially could be involved with the Community Preservation Committee, that there might be, what is this? No, there hasn't never been a Trails Committee before,
sure.
so if it was identified, it would,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
a quick statement,
The-
and even
yeah, that's good.
identifying,
Yeah.
here's, this is who we are, and
Yeah.
here's the people.
At least half of our committee will be in the room anyway with
Right, right.
town meeting hats on, so.
Hopefully, if we all get elected.
If we all get elected or re-elected, right.
You running for town meeting?
Which
So
district are you
that's,
in?
Four.
yeah, perfect.
What
One.
district?
So
You're in
that's-
one.
So that's on our,
Because it moved from 6 to 1 when it was on.
so that's
town
on our
meeting at 6.
calendar as
Oh,
well.
okay.
What else,
March 6th,
outreach,
right.
so the outreach so outreach opportunities.
Cameras are still on, boys.
We just talked about probably 20 to 30 right now, right here. There's any number of things, we obviously, I don't think we're in jeopardy of spreading ourselves too thin, but what we need to reinforce, we need to, when somebody says, can you give me X, whatever that is, we just need to be ready to back it up. So that's why there's a lot of pent-up demand, and we just need to be able to deliver. So, so again, the mission statement, and who are we, and what are we up to, and why are we here? Other than I, really enjoy everybody's company, and thank you for coming. Completed walks, thank you. Outreach opportunities, we just rattled off a bunch. Future group trail walks, will focus on Westwood Germany Brook. Announcements, we've hit all Earth Day, Spring Community Work Party. Cleveland School's open, it's a TBD, but there is demand there, interest. Annual town meeting. Any other items to discuss? So part of having an open meeting and, an organized agenda, this is our chance to put things onto the agenda for our next meeting, which is Tuesday, March 12th at 7 p.m. So does anybody have, let's see, so we just committed to having an update from the Earth Day Subcommittee on March 12th. We're gonna have a report from the subcommittee on mapping on March 26th. I'll volunteer to put something together for annual town meeting. And and propose that at our next meeting, or just throw that out for some ideas. Anyone else have other, you're not gonna be here on March 12th,
Correct.
but maybe on March 26th, you can give us an update on Earth Day?
Yeah.
Because given that, we'll have less than a month to go, right, so, good.
Yeah, and
You'll give the
Jerry-
Earth Day subcommittee your agenda for the Earth Day.
Before-
Yeah, I'm gonna-
Itinerary we already have.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna email Jerry, and Jerry will have plenty to report on the 12th, and then even on the 26th, Jerry can report on more stuff, and then I can add in some Progress Norwood stuff. I would like to add one
Yeah,
other
sure.
thing to the 26th is possibility or discussion, and we may have to, or you may have to talk to Paul and Tony first, but some form of a Facebook group, or Facebook page.
All right,
Under,
Can I-
under the town,
Yes, you know, the
sure.
Norwood Trails Advisory Group Facebook page to post different events and
Yeah.
pictures and this and that, and I don't
we,
know.
yeah.
Because I know that was always a thing we've been wanting to for about a year now,
Mhm.
you know, as far as being underneath the Concom. But now that we're a separate group, do we have that ability?
Yep.
So maybe that
So
needs-
maybe just above the section that says next meetings in the agenda, so there is what we call the parking lot, where we've got an idea that we're not quite ready to tackle it, or there's other moving parts that we have to get to before getting to that.
Hmm.
So let's have a discussion in March to kick that off about website/social media/newsletter. It would definitely be a good idea to create a newsletter and get it out in the month of March. Whatever form that takes. We did, as I mentioned, when the Walpole folks were here, we did email the original 175 or so email contacts about the open space survey. So too, we'll just try to figure out what kind of message we wanna send out. So let's target, let's commit to sending out a newsletter by the end of the month of March. Is that, all right, so let's kind of brainstorm that over the next couple of weeks and 2 meetings. So on March 26th, we would have basically a newsletter ready to go in draft form, in final draft form.
And that was a lot of Lee, Sue, and yourself on the last.
I think at that time it was Sue,
Oh, Team Sue.
and then Lee,
Team
and then
Sue.
myself.
Okay.
Right, yep.
So
Yeah, it was a collaborative effort, and
get her
that's
up to speed.
the way we'll do it going forward, so. And then we just touched on the email list usage. We wanna try to make sure that we're communicating with those folks. We wanna keep their interest and their excitement about this effort. We obviously don't wanna overuse it or misuse it. So maybe we come up with our own little sidebar, acceptable use type self-control guidance there. And then we did circulate an external contacts list, which we'll circulate again and just make sure that that's visible. It's a great resource. Marguerite Krupp, who couldn't join us tonight, could not join us tonight, and Craig contributed to that contacts list. And then the only other thing that I did talk to Paul about today, and I'm gonna touch base with him again tomorrow, along the lines of what we talked about with the Walpole folks about a work party, like how do we organize a day event? So, I have been in touch with the guy that runs the Blue Hills, work parties. That's what they call them, work parties, which is basically wear old clothes and go out in the field, go out in the trail and clean it up or do whatever. We put in water bars, which basically reroute the water. Lee has done a lot of that work as well at Bay Circuit and other places, so.
Cool. Expert.
And-
What?
See, he's an expert.
He's an expert.
Okay, anything else for the next agenda? Good, tackles enough? Can't wait to see where Vic goes next. Right,
Motion to adjourn.
okay, second,
Second.
okay, all those in favor?
That's
All
a
those
quick
opposed?
second.